So yeah, just go ahead and start with, who you are, where you're from, what you do.
Okay. And I'm just looking at you.
Okay. Act like we don't know each other.
Okay. So my name is Bryanna Thomas, and I'm originally from Dayton. I lived in Columbus almost 8 years now, and I am a commercial real estate agent.
Nice. What made you want to get into real estate?
Ironically, it was my very first apartment was in Columbus, and I was working with a leasing consultant, and I told her, like, oh my God, what you do looks so much fun and so cool. Like, I want to do that. I was working for AT&T at the time, on campus, like at the store, like hating my life. And I was like, that seems so much fun. It almost kind of seemed like a realtor, but without the license kind of thing. And I did residential property management for probably like 6 years. And then I was just kind of getting drained. And I met a gentleman who kind of laid out the current career I'm in right now. And that was that. So really just moving to Columbus was kind of what got me into it.
You said you moved from where?
Dayton.
Dayton.
Mm-hmm.
What was it like growing up in Dayton, being, an African-American woman for you?
Yeah. It was interesting only for the sheer fact of, like, I grew up in a predominantly white town called Beaver Creek, which kind of already sounds like very Ohio. My mom and my grandparents just did not really want me and my brother in Dayton public schools. And so at the time it was either you go to Dayton public schools, which was predominantly black, or you go to school in the burbs, which was predominantly white. There wasn't really too many schools that had like a good diversity ratio. It just wasn't there. And so I was always the only black girl.
Well, just kind of like take us a little deeper. Like, what were some of maybe the daily challenges you may have faced, or things you struggle with, or like even now looking back, you're kind of like, oh wow, like I didn't even recognize that during that time that was something that bothered me, but now you can kind of reflect and be like, wow, I got through that though.
It's so weird because like I didn't realize a lot until 2020, when I feel like we were all being so much more vocal as a community, and it was kind of like learning like, oh, it's okay to kind of say those things. I didn't realize a lot of things until just a couple years ago, which is so wild to me. And little comments like, you're like the whitest black girl, or you're beautiful for a black girl, not knowing that those are insults, and they're backhanded compliments, but really insults. And even just like sleepovers, like I wrap my hair every night, but like when I would go to a sleepover, like the other girls didn't, so I didn't want to, and them have questions. I was always trying to fit in. I never really like experienced like any bullying, but I also think at a very young age, I had the mindset of like, if you can't beat them, join them kind of thing. And I don't know if that's necessarily what I would tell my child today, but that's kind of what I had in my head. Was that. And I will say I'm fortunate for how I grew up. I don't think I would be in certain rooms had I not grown up the way I did. But I feel like in my 20s, I'm really like just trying to dig into who I am, and I'm being me unapologetically.
Yeah.
I'm never going to switch up. I talk like this because of where I'm from. I don't talk like this for a front kind of thing.
If someone on the street came up to you and said, who is Bryanna Thomas? How would you describe who you are in your words?
Oh, just like word by word, or just
however you want to describe it.
Yeah, I would say Bryanna Thomas is charismatic, and I would say Bryanna Thomas is very resilient.
I like that.
Yeah.
What makes you resilient?
Just dealing with a lot of things. I feel like my 20s have been the most life-changing years. Some in like the most, amazing ways, and some in the most tragic ways. But I feel like I've lived like 40 years in the last like 9 years. But there hasn't been a major situation that's happened in my life that I haven't overcome. And not only overcome, but seen better at the end of the tunnel.
What do you, you say that you're resilient, you've gotten through these things. Where did you adopt this mindset? Was it something that maybe you just, it's something that was innate in you, maybe you're just born with it? Do you feel like you just kind of built it up? You built this resilience time after time after time. Was it something you saw in someone else? Like, where do you feel like this resilience came from for you?
Yeah, I feel like I got it from my mom and my grandmother. I feel like my mother went through a lot, and seeing her just kind of be like, I never saw her sweat. I could probably count on one hand how many times I saw my mom cry. So for me, it's kind of like one of those things where it's not an option, because while I'm spending time being negative, let's figure out how,
Yeah.
I can do something. And so I think at a very young age, I recognized that. And then just from there on, even like I have friends that are like, something will happen, so focused on the negative, and it's like, you just can't. That's not what life is about.
Yeah.
And you manifest those things. I fully believe that.
For sure.
Like, I'm probably a little too annoying with it, but I'm very glass half full. Like, I mean, you got to work with something, or like, I'm very like, what's meant to be will be, and this is probably happening for something else, because it's like, you only have one life. Like, if you can continuously think about positive things, like, they will come to you. I believe that.
Agreed. I want to backtrack a little bit. You said you kind of, when you were younger, had like the mindset of like, if you can't beat them, join them. And now you say like you've kind of developed into your own person. When do you feel like that clicked for you? Like, maybe was it a moment? Do you feel like it's been just over time? But when do you feel like you could look in the mirror and be like, nah, that girl in the mirror, like, I know who she is for sure now?
Yeah. It's funny because I feel like from the exterior, people who know me, they would say, Bree has it together. She has it all together. And some days I think that, and some days I'm like looking in the mirror like, I have no idea what's going on. But I think when I moved here, I think I'm like, okay, like this is when life is starting. Like, I made a decision to move from a city that I'm not from, and I'm writing my own story now. Like, no one's here, and I lived on my own, and I was, looking into other jobs and doing these things and really like living life. For me, I felt like for a little while I was living for other people or trying to fit in. And, even like going to college, I felt like I went to college because everyone else did. I never really had a passion to go to school. I never did. I loved middle school. I loved high school, but I loved the social aspect of things. I never was like, I love taking tests. I never had an interest in that. But I think when I moved here is when I finally realized like I was living for myself and doing what I wanted to do.
Gotcha. Sorry if also not like super responsive, because I don't want to like.
Yeah. No, you're fine.
So going back to, the resilience thing. So you moved here, you said you've been through some things, you figured out who you were, now you've gotten to this point, and you've overcome some tough adversity. Mm-hmm. Obviously, I think you know where I'm going to go with this. But,
yeah.
You went through a tragic situation. Just kind of in your own words, walk us through that, and, just how your resilience has helped you through that, and, just kind of like what it's been like.
Yeah, so it's kind of crazy. The story kind of plays out in a 10-year span, and I've kind of been realizing that now. So I think the first major part of the adversity that I dealt with was when I learned that my mom was soon to be convicted for a crime. Mm-hmm. And I was 18 or 19 when she sat us down and told us, and she had to tell us because they were going to raid our home. And I mean, they don't call you up and say, hey, like, we're about to come. So all of us, me and my brother and my stepfather at the time, had to be prepared. And I will never forget this. So I knew I was very upset with my mom. It was almost kind of finding out like Santa Claus wasn't real. I just thought, oh my God, my mom, she's a single mom, has these 2 kids. dad's not really doing much for the kids. So like, I'm like, I just want to be like my mom when I grow up. Like, she didn't even need our dad to do anything. And, getting involved in a crime when it comes to money, it's kind of like, wait. And I don't think I ever maybe told my mom that I thought she was kind of like, Superman or whatever. But I think for me, that was the biggest letdown. I was angry with her, not for what she did, but for her basically taking off a mask that I thought was her actual face in a way. And so one morning, I'm a freshman in college, and I'm hearing my brother and my stepdad maybe like roughhousing in the morning, whatever. Like, my brother's still in high school, parents are still going to work, and the noise is coming in a little bit louder, and it's like, is anyone in the house? And I'm like, okay, that is not a voice that I know. And someone busts open my door. And again, 19 years old, like, young girl. And so, they're like, get downstairs. You have to get downstairs now. And they're asking me like, is there anyone else in the house? I'm like, I don't even know what time it is. I don't know. I was like, my brother may be in here, and there's one spot that he could have hid in his bedroom. And someone showed me a clock, and I said, okay, he should be at school. And so I had to sit and wait, like, in my pajamas, and they let me go back up to my room, get dressed, and get ready to go to school. And I remember after that, my grandfather, my mom's dad, he was in a nursing home at the time. And unfortunately, due to a stroke, he was just nonverbal after that, but he knew something was wrong. And I remember that day I visited him, went to my classes, went to work. I worked for LensCrafters at the time, and came home, and my room, our home was just, everything was out of every drawer, every cabinet, every crevice. So, and going back, we live in a predominantly white town, and we knew our neighbors, and one of my neighbors was my best friend's grandparents, and there's all these cop cars. So it's like one of those neighborhoods, like, why are all these cops here? Because nothing goes down here. And so that was when after that raid, and I went home, that's how I really knew I was resilient. I did all these things after. So a year later, my mom is, sentenced to 3 years in prison in Marysville. That's also why that kind of brought me to Columbus too. I was closer, but the first time, my mother had cancer, she actually found out in prison. And I didn't know how severe it was until after, because her and my grandmother were very much like, let's not get the kids worked up. But we always used to say like it was like a curse and a blessing, because she found out in prison, and the closest facility was the James. So, it was a curse and a blessing. Like, she didn't walk out with a medical bill. They took her and treated her, and they actually did an early releasement because she was sick. And she had a great reputation. You rarely ever hear a prison say, come back and work for us. So like, again, like maybe resilience just is in my blood kind of thing. And so after my mother was released, she just went back to normal. Well, she went back to life, I should say. Like she was a felon. And when you are a felon, you're always going to be one in everyone's eyes. Can't really rent apartments. You can't do a lot. So, but what was so cool was she had employers that took chances on her. And closer to the end, she started doing seminars with prisons, women's prisons, with her and her employer. And kind of like, what was that conversation of, hey, we like you. Every job runs a background check. She has to get in front of it. So just kind of giving hope to other prisoners. My mother was a college-educated woman, but, still, like, she was a felon making six figures in corporate America. You don't really hear that too much, unless, people are going into business for themselves. But working under someone as a felon making six figures was kind of insane to even hear. So, that's why I don't sweat the small stuff. So, life is going on. She's growing at work. She's growing outside of work. And in 2021, I was working my last shift as a property manager. And my mom, she just had a really bad stomach aches this one weekend. She thought she ate something bad. And she finally went to the hospital because something was wrong. And they said, yeah, she might need to get her gallbladder removed. And, it's normal. And they did some further testing, and she ended up having metastatic breast cancer. Which, the first 6 months of her being sick, you would have never really known. But when it hit, and it got very unrecognizable. Like, I could not recognize my mom. And so I think it was, it was like 6 months of just like really tough, like to the point where I was zoning it out. It was in a way, it was kind of nice that I lived here. When she was in prison dealing with it, I didn't have to see it. It wasn't really real then, but her being in Dayton and I could go home, I found every excuse not to go home. Every time. Like I was studying for my real estate license then, so I used that a lot. And I just couldn't fathom it, really.
Sorry, I don't want to...
No, you're fine.
Do you remember the day you found out?
Yeah, it was October 3rd or 4th of 2021. And I was quite literally sitting at my desk, like about to close out my last shift on a Sunday. It was a Sunday. And I was FaceTiming her and my grandmother. And I'm like, well, what's the holdup? Why aren't they removing the gallbladder so you can go home? And it was, well, it's not just a gallbladder. And she said it was cancer. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. And luckily I had taken 2 weeks in between starting a new job. So I was in Dayton during that time. But again, I mean, she was very much like, I'm going to fight this. Again, very positive. And so in my head, I'm like, everything's going to be fine. We've already done this before. We've already been here. So I'm thinking, okay, and so I think they knew how much more serious it was, but I did not. And I just, my mom shielded us from everything bad, if she could, that dealt with her. Nothing that was going to get us worked up. And so she passed away exact year from the day that she found out.
An exact year?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. I think something that was like the most, I always say I'm not religious, I'm spiritual, I would say. And I believe like people know. They totally know. And so I will never forget this. My mom was probably in the hospital for probably about 6 to 8 days. I don't know. For me, it felt like one big day, but it was like 6 to 8 days. I don't know. And, when you stay in the hospital with someone, it's always like nurses coming in, it feels like every 5 minutes. So you don't really get sleep in there. So I remember my mom saying, she called for me and then I said, yeah. She says, are you scared? And for me, being her, really, I am my mother's child. I said, no, I'm not scared, putting on her front. I'm like, I'm not scared, because if we leave out of here, then great. We'll leave out of here. We'll beat this thing. And that's the way it was supposed to happen. I said, but if we don't, you'll be with your father. My grandfather has been gone for probably anywhere from 12 to 14 years. So it's been a while. But I said, no, it's supposed to, and then I never heard my mom say this, and I'm so sorry. But she said, I said, are you scared? And she said, yeah. And so that was probably like wee hours of the morning. And then that morning, the doctors come in and they say, I couldn't even tell you because, it's kind of like blacking out. But like they say, we'll have to cut you and put you in surgery. And at that moment, she said, no. She said, no, I'm not doing anything else. And so she really made the conscious decision to say, I'm done. Like, because there was also a huge risk of her going under and not coming back. So she probably made that decision around like 6 or 7 a.m. And then she was gone like around 6 or 7 that day. So it was a way, and it's so funny because my mother was very much a planner, as am I. I'm like, only this woman can plan this situation. So, I mean, it was nice to be able to call people. People were able to say goodbye. And so I was probably in denial for probably about a month. In a way of just like, it did not feel real. It kind of felt like she was on vacation in a way.
Yeah. And
my mom was only 47. So, 48. She was 48. She was 47. She passed away like a month before her 48th birthday. We're 20 years apart. Yeah. So, that's the very first moment where I'm like, I felt this small, and I felt, 3 years old, because I'm like, wait a minute. Like, that's my parent. Yeah. And not only is she my parent, she's the parent.
Yeah. The only parent.
The only parent that's parented me. So, it felt like I was 5 again, because I'm like, wait a minute. I felt like, I'm like, it has to feel like this when someone is, adopted or in foster care and just like not knowing where your parents are. That's what it must feel like. People have asked me, how are you feeling? I was like, I don't know if you ever remember, like maybe when you're a kid and you're in a mall or a fair and you lose your parent for a quick second, but your anxiety kind of starts, you're like, oh crap, like that's how it feels all the time. That's the best way to explain it for me. And I've learned like grief is like the weirdest thing. It shows up in the weirdest ways.
I heard a quote. It said, grief is just love without anywhere to go.
Yeah, it really is.
Wow.
It really, really is. And it was amazing to see who showed up. I mean, people from the woodworks that I hadn't talked to in years, but like maybe from high school, like knew my mother, or, just people that you're friends with that you would just never think. I mean, a text, flowers, whatever it was amazing. But I saw a tweet and it said, grief is hard. You not only have to grieve the person you lost, but you also grieve relationships you thought you had. And I learned that during the passing of my mother. Like, people were not there for me the way I thought they would be. And what that looks like, I can't tell you. I really can't. So there's a piece of me that's like, but that was probably after kind of like I'm still grieving, you know what I mean? But that was even tough because these are still people that I see. You know what I mean? So that was tough, but I've heard it from multiple people. You really, really find out who is there for you at your lowest. Yeah. And for me, like, I mean, my friends and people knew, like, I have friends that are like, oh, I haven't talked to my mom in a couple of days. I'm like, oh, I'm like, talked to my mom 3 times today already. Like, I've always said, like, my friends are amazing. I love my friends, but I needed no one besides mine. Like, I was good. Yeah. And my mom was definitely that mom, like, I'm your only friend. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm the only one that's ever going to fully ever have your back. And that's so true. Like, it really is. So, you know, so that was tough. And I thank God that my grandmother, her mother, you know, was there to administer all these things. When someone dies, it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work. I mean,
I saw my mom go through it.
People to call, like just planning. Luckily, my mom was like, I want to be cremated and I want to party. Nothing sad. Mm-hmm. So that was nice, but it's a lot of work. And so, unfortunately, you know, I'm not a parent, but I can't imagine a parent losing a child. So for my grandmother, it was just, and it was once there was nothing else to do, once my mother's home was sold, that was kind of like her last thing. You just kind of saw a decline in her energy, and she would do.
Your grandma?
Yeah, she was also planning. She was very much planning. I remember she came here to fly out to go see one of her friends in Texas. And before she said, we need to go to the bank. And I said, well, why? She says, well, I just want to put you on all my bank accounts. And I said, well, why? She said, I don't know. Like, I'm going on a plane. You never know. I'm like, yeah, it could happen, but you'll be all right. And just little things. And she had a just because party. And I didn't think anything of it. I just thought she wanted to have a party. And 3 or 4 weeks after the Just Because party, my grandmother passes. And so it's 9 months.
That's crazy.
After my mom. And I mean, she already had lost the love of her life, my grandfather, and then, you know, the second love of her life, my mom. And my mom was the only child. So for her, it truly was like, I have no purpose. And we were in the hospital and she goes, you know, I'm 75 years old. I have seen everything. I have went everywhere I've ever wanted to go. I've bought everything I've ever wanted to buy.
It's the way to live.
And I mean, how can you be mad at that? So we leave the hospital though. Everything's fine. She's calling me, feels great. And one morning I got a call from, luckily, one of her best friends and also her cousin. They were living together, and she calls me and she's like, something's not right. She wants to go back to the hospital, and she's panting, and I make it back to Columbus. And so I'm driving down the freeway and I call me and my brother's godmother, and I'm like, you need to get over there because they're not telling me something and I need to know what I'm walking into. So she gets up out of bed, puts on her clothes, she drives there, and she's like, okay, I just want to let you know, like, your grandmother has passed. And so, you know, my mother being the only child, I'm next in line. I have a younger brother. So my brother was out of town at the time. And so it was just very logical. I didn't really have any time to break down. I was like, okay, I need to call these people. I need to do this. I need to...
Planning mode.
Yeah. My grandmother was one of 8 siblings. So there was all these people to call. And but there was a little something peaceful about her passing, in a way of just, I knew she wasn't happy. And her doctor even told her, they said, Anita, people die from broken hearts all the time. And I never heard that. But he said that to her all the time. And, you know, she wanted to stop taking medicine and she wanted to stop doing this. And we had conversations where it was in a way of saying just like, I don't want to be here. And again, like, I come from such positivity. Like, so to hear stuff like that, or even hear my mom say she's scared, it was so weird for me.
Dang.
So yeah, so it'll be a year for my grandmother in July. And I feel like I'm still wrapping some things up, but I feel like I can slowly breathe again.
Yeah.
In a way of just like calling insurances and dealing with family, and, you know, I had to put another house on the market, and just all of these things. My 20s have been something, but I'll be 29 next week, and I'm like, I want to set the tone already for, you know, this new decade coming in. Like, I want to be prepared when I get into 30. I don't want to say 30, I want to do X, Y, and Z. I want to have already been prepared to walk into it. So, yeah, every day is different.
What do you think has helped you the most get through this process?
Probably just staying busy. I feel like, and probably some of my friends would agree, I can easily put on just this have it all together front. And sometimes when I even step into my home, I don't even turn it off. And I think sometimes I'm scared of emotion. Not emotions, because, like, I'm also an empath. Like, if you were sitting here to start crying, I'd probably start crying.
Same.
But, like, I don't want anyone to cry for me. And I don't want anyone to see me cry for what I'm crying about. But, like, if someone else is crying, I'm like, oh my God. But, like, for me, it's like, I hate being that way. Where my brother is, like, the complete opposite. He will cry. He's like the emotional gangster. Like, he seems all tough, but he will cry with a drop of a dime.
Yeah.
But me, I'm very much...
Yeah.
I'm just more logical. Like, when my mom kind of decided I'm like, okay, like, this is happening. And I wasn't, it was the weirdest thing, because I think maybe my brother was even like, why is she, like, not crying? Why is she? And I did cry, but I wasn't sobbing. I also think, again, I was just in denial. So.
Yeah. I definitely, I'm trying to think, you know, I mean, obviously I'm taking all this in, but,
yeah.
You know, it takes me back to when, you know, I lost my grandmother to cancer. And, you know, she was next to my mom, like, that was my dog.
Yeah.
You know, like, I would stay at her place, you know, just me and her. You know, she would take all the money she had, buy me one video game every Christmas.
Yeah.
And then, you know, I just remember just some of these, not obviously total the same emotions, but, you know, it's just, you know, I'm trying to think about, I'm like, man, I think I didn't cry until the funeral. I walked out and I looked my dad in the eyes.
Yeah.
I lost it. You know, because he doesn't cry either.
Right.
I think it was like two people that are just...
Yeah, who don't cry. And
it's like that.
Yeah.
So, but I don't think not crying doesn't mean you're not sad.
I know. Like, I remember I was talking to one of my friends on FaceTime, and he lives out of town, and he was like, I'm talking like this, and he's like, you are so weird. And I'm like, what? And he's like, you're just not crying, or like, and I was like, I like to deal with things in private.
Same.
And this might be a bad way to look at things, but genuinely, there's nothing anyone can do for me, right? Like, in a way of like, you can't bring my mom back.
Right.
And a lot of my friends haven't even dealt with losing a parent yet, right? So it's like, not to say I don't appreciate the friends who, I mean, I had friends that were like at my door when I first got back to Columbus. Like, I don't care if you don't say one word to me. I just need to see you. I need to lay eyes on you. So little, like, those are major gestures, but like, I just, you know, someone continuously sitting down with me, a friend, like, there's nothing you can do, dog. Like, it, you know, and so
I feel you.
that, I don't know if that's a bad way to look at things, but.
Do you feel like because you just had to be so resilient time after time that it was like, obviously losing a parent is not easy, but you're just kind of like, you're like, man, I've been here. And it's like, it's like another time in my life where it's just like, I got to be resilient again.
Yeah.
So like that maybe just played a part to like, I'm sure, and like I said, I'm sure you cried, but you were just kind of like, right now I got to be resilient, Bree, and like I'll deal with sad Bree later. But like,
yeah,
you know.
and it's so funny because like I know when I'm building it up, because if I do cry these days, it's at the most random things. Like Target, I was in it was Christmas time, and I was Christmas shopping, and a Jessica Simpson Christmas song came on that I remember playing when I worked in retail, and I worked in the Beaver Creek Mall, and my mom would come to the mall all the time, and it just reminded of me like of her Black Friday shopping or Christmas shopping, and she'd stop it. But we never listened to Jessica Simpson together ever, but like I heard that song, it reminded me of my old job, and it just goes back, and I'm like crying in Target, you know, like it's the most random things. Or like, I don't know if you're familiar with Pelotonia, but the company I work for gets really involved, and we had like a little kickoff happy hour for it the other week, and I was having a glass of wine, and someone was like, so what's everyone's connection to Pelotonia? Like, why does it mean a lot to you? And just started crying. That was probably also a little bit of the wine, but like, I'm like, oh man, like it just comes at the most random times.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I mean, for being vulnerable and sharing that, because I know it's not easy.
Yeah.
But I definitely appreciate you, you know, being open and being willing to share that with not just me, you know, but with, you know, whoever decides to, you know, tune in and watch it. And, you know, it's good to see that you're in good spirits and that you're.
I have to be.
Yeah.
And my mom wouldn't want it any other way.
For sure. Man, I'm over here like, don't. So I guess last but not least, you know, obviously the name of the page is Politely Dangerous, and we can already kind of tell, you know, the things that make you polite, you know, about what you said. But what would you say are some of the things that, you know, make you, I guess probably your resilience would be your answer, would make you dangerous, you know?
Yeah, I would say I'm afraid of nothing. I really am. I mean, I say that, and it's so funny because I'm getting a tattoo for my mom, and she has one of her journals from prison, and after every entry she wrote, "I am not afraid."
Dang.
And I think a lot of people ask me, like, how do you feel aside from sadness, is being afraid in a way of just like making big decisions and things I would just run past my mom and my grandmother.
Yeah.
So, you know, again, it puts you back as like your child. It really opens up your inner child when you're losing a parent, especially this young. But aside from my emotions, I'm probably more afraid of my emotions of not having my mom versus physically afraid of things. But yeah, I think what makes me dangerous is genuinely not afraid to, you know, just live. And I think a lot of people these days are.